Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome along to the latest episode of the Samuel Luckhurst Show from the Manchester Evening News. I am today's host, George Smith, and joining me, of course, is our Chief United writer, Samuel Luckhurst, who is back from a week off. Samuel, good to see you. Did you have a good week's rest?
Yes, yeah, it goes very quickly as always, but it was pleasant. And then the reality dawns that we're only halfway through this gap between United games. It's obviously still 8 days to go, and it was 16 of this 16-day gap. So it's probably going to be another relatively torturous week where it's the FA Cup quarterfinals restarting the top flight or most of the top flight matches this weekend, which I can't imagine too many people are pleased about, but that's on the schedulers.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I've been off for 4 days as well, and it went very, very quickly, and found myself coming back this morning and realised another 8 days until United are next in action. But it brings its challenges, the international breaks. But with no football to review this Monday, myself and Samuel have decided we're going to go through the whole of the United first team squad and offer our opinions on who the club should keep, sell, or possibly release in this coming summer's transfer window. As Samuel pointed out to me before we came in air, it ties in nicely with the story you've done this morning, Samuel, looking at the possibility of United wanting to possibly shift up to at least 10 players in this coming summer's transfer window. So without further ado, we'll get the ball rolling. We'll start in the goalkeeping department, Samuel. And obviously some answers are probably going to be quite more straightforward than others. Some may generate some debate. We shall see. But starting with the goalkeepers then, Andre Onana, obviously, he's had his critics this season. But where would you be with his future this coming summer?
I would still say keep, just because I think that there could be, you're reduced to one market really that could buy him. And I think that's probably Saudi Arabia. And even if United do need to get a new goalkeeper in this summer, but you probably need someone who would come in, and gently is the wrong word to use because it's never going to be gentle for a United goalkeeper coming in. But if there's to be a handover, it would probably have to be it could be quite gradual. I'm trying to look at the bigger picture rather than say get him out, get him in, because it's seldom smooth. And as I wrote in a piece recently, United haven't actually proactively sold a number one goalkeeper since the late 70s, which is a remarkable quirk and just highlights how well they've done in identifying long-term goalkeepers. I mean, Schmeichel was there for 8 years, Van der Sar 6 years, De Gea 12 years. I mean, to go from Van der Sar and then to De Gea effectively with a couple of bumps in the road where Anders Lindegaard was number one, it's not luck. It's just very, very well judged in terms of the recruitment with those two coming in. So it's a weird one, because say they get a £30 million offer from a Saudi Pro League club, I'm not going to sit here and say United shouldn't accept that. But looking at the whole goalkeeping roster, where I think there's a better chance or there's more probability of the other two going, do you want that much upheaval in the goalkeeping department? Probably not. So I think Onana, he should have one more year to try and cling on and try and remain a Manchester United player.
Yeah, I think I would be inclined to agree with that. It would be very big to sort of make a change in number one. As you mentioned, the other two could well leave this summer, starting with Altay Bayindir. He's out of contract in 2027. Still got a couple of years or so to run on that, therefore. But like we said, Samuel, I think you brought the point up 2 or 3 podcasts ago about the World Cup being next year. He's going to want that number one spot with Turkey. The chances are he's not going to be able to compete for that if he's still sitting on the bench at Old Trafford.
Yeah, I'd say sell him and I think that United could possibly make a profit on him. They only paid about £4.3 million, and okay, they're not going to. I don't think they would ever make double on him. There's a reason why Fenerbahce wanted to sell him, but there's the chance to make a profit on him, and also they will want a new goal. Amrin wants a new goalkeeper, and therefore you need to make room for that new goalkeeper. And it shouldn't be just someone who's going to come in as like a Scott Carson or a Richard Wright type figure. It's got to be someone who I think would compete with Onana, and maybe things will change drastically, and it'll be easier to shift Onana in the summer than Bayindir. But I just think with Bayindir, he had that heroic afternoon or evening at Arsenal, but other than that, he's not really looked like ever being a long-term goalkeeper for Manchester United in the sense of being that dependable understudy that Sergio Romero was.
Yeah, again, I'd be inclined to agree with your thoughts there, Samuel. But obviously, we've said that we're doing this looking at the first team squad, purposely the senior players. Otherwise, we'd be sat here for another week going through the whole academy system. Tom Heaton, the last of the senior crop of the current goalkeepers, 39 next month. His contract's up. Highly likely may decide to call a day on what's been a brilliant playing career and announce his retirement this summer.
Yeah, I think it probably will be not so much release as retired, and that will probably be on his terms as well. He's had quite a lot of injuries for someone who's a backup goalkeeper, so I think that's, you look at that from the outside, it does feel like his body is maybe telling him that it's time to hang up the gloves and maybe pick up the microphone and start a career in punditry, or keep the gloves on and go into coaching.
Yeah, quite possible. We shall see. So that's the goalkeepers ticked off. Moving into the bank of defenders, Samuel, we'll kick off with Diogo Dalot, who has, again, had to play a lot of football out of his preferred position this season over on the left. Obviously, the formation changed mid-season to the wing-back role has obviously developed his position even further. Where would you sit with his future this summer?
Keep, but he's got to improve a hell of a lot, and also it's an area of the team that United do need to strengthen. So they need someone to probably compete with him next season, because him and Mazraoui haven't really competed with each other at all. Where they've been possibly two of the most available players in the squad, they've started a hell of a lot of matches in the same 11, whether it's under Ten Hag or Van Nistelrooy or Amorim. So Dalot, I'd keep as certainly as an option, and he can play on the right, he can play on the left, he can play in a back three even. He has that versatility. He's got the fitness. His availability since he came back to United from Milan has been, it's almost rivaled Bruno Fernandes's overall. But his performance level has really, I didn't think he was particularly good last season. There were some people who thought he got United Players Player of the Year, which I wasn't surprised by, because players will look at Dalot, they like his personality. There's a big Latino contingent in the dressing room, so a lot of them will gravitate towards him. He's a character that is easy to get on well with. He speaks French, English, Spanish, Portuguese, so he is a player that actually transcends the dressing room, and he's easy to get on with, and he comes across very well as well. Having interviewed him, he's a good personality, and as I said, he's never injured. So it's easy to see why, if you're a teammate, you're sharing a dressing room with him, you would vote for him in those circumstances. But his performance level has got worse quite significantly this season. And there are far more players in that squad that United should be getting rid of in the summer. But he is a player that I don't necessarily think should be starting for them next season. They do need an upgrade in those wide roles. They've obviously opted for Dorgu on the left. They do need another wide player, even though they have got the options there. I mean, Ahmad could occupy that role when he comes back into the team, but they do need they need another fullback / wing-back / winger, whoever that may be.
Yep, again, fully agree. So you've mentioned him already, Nusa Mazraoui. He's probably, in my opinion, probably one of United's best signings of the season, with the players they brought in last summer, the cheapest by some distance as well. Don't think there's much debate to be had on his future at Old Trafford, given how versatile he's been this season. He's been excellent.
That's a simple keep. As I agree, I've done the ratings for the season. I think he comes in at about third, which is, I think it's about right, really. He's been pretty consistent. There are clear flaws to his game, but given the context of how bad United have been this season and how available he's been, and with it where it's his first season in English football as well, I think he's done pretty commendably.
Yeah, absolutely. And another summer signing was, of course, Lenny Yoro, arguably the statement signing of last summer. Obviously, the pre-season injury set him back a little bit, but we've seen him since December. He's gradually improved, signed with a long-term vision in mind. It's quite obvious where his future lies this summer.
Yes, that's a very easy keep.
And Matthijs de Ligt as well, another summer arrival from Bayern Munich, who I would say, again, has got better as the season has developed. He's probably in his best run of form he's had since swapping Bayern for Old Trafford. Probably another keep as well, I would imagine.
He's a player I don't think United should ever have signed. So I would. It's one of those fence-sitting ones, which I know is not usually my style. But I mean, United are not going to get a fee that's going to make them say, yes, we're making a profit on him, or we're not making a loss on him, so we'll sell him. He's not going to go anywhere in the summer. And I completely agree with you that his form of late has been good. Ironically, for a defender, since he scored against Ipswich, maybe he's looked a lot more solid. He's had some steady games. He does strike me as a defender who is better in European matches than the Premier League matches. But I thought he was superb against Leicester, albeit it was against Leicester. So it's another one that I'd be kind of easy if he stayed. I'd be content, pretty okay with the prospect of him being sold. But let's face it, he's not going to be sold in the summer because nobody's going to come in with the money for him. So, but he needs to sustain this form he's in at the moment. This little period can't just be an anomaly, and he's got the credentials and he's got the clout to kick on now, and he's been involved in some big run-ins in the past in his career. So hopefully, for United's sake, that stands him in good stead for the next couple of months.
Yeah, you'd certainly like to think so, because I think obviously he's still got his prime years to come, and there is a good defender in there. He's proven it with the transfer fees he's commanded over the years and the clubs he's obviously played for. But moving a little deeper into the centre-back pool, Harry Maguire, obviously United have already set out their intentions with him by extending his contract a few months ago. He's tied down now until the summer of 2026. Obviously, that gave United the scope to possibly sell him this summer, Samuel, to bank a fee before that contract expiring. But from the way Ruben Amorim's been talking about in recent months, I can't see that being likely this summer, but we could be proven wrong.
No, I think that is just a keep, which works for all parties. He'll have one more year at United, you would think, and then he'll move on. He'll just come to the end of his contract unless he has this remarkable Indian summer that makes United think twice about it. As you said, the way Amorim's spoken about him and the way Maguire has spoken about that discussion they had when it came to extending his contract, I would be amazed if United ended up selling him in the summer. And also I'd be amazed if a club came in and stumped up a fee that would make United think, we should sell him. That's absolutely one of the things that we should do. It's not. I don't think it'll even be on their to-do list for the summer.
No, I'd agree with that fully. Sticking with the centre halves, then Lisandro Martinez, obviously currently sidelined with an ACL injury. It's going to be a good few months before we see him back, possibly pre-season at the earliest, perhaps. Obviously, we know he's a very, very good player in his day. He's been very good with his ball-playing credentials. Obviously, injuries have been an issue for him in the last couple of years. But with this injury, Samuel, it's even if United wanted to, which I don't think they would, it would make wanting to sell him quite difficult this summer because of that injury situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's unsellable because of the injury, and he certainly wouldn't have been one of the players they were looking to sell actively either. He was looking good. I think that from the turn of the year, he was a lot better and he was in good form when he did his injury. So it's an easy keep by virtue of the injury, but also he is a player that when at his optimum, you put him in that starting 11.
Yep, absolutely. And the final two centre halves, Victor Lindelof and Johnny Evans, both out of contract this summer. Victor Lindelof, as you've said many times, both on this podcast and sort of in written pieces, Samuel, he's a player that should have been moved on a long time ago. Johnny Evans, highly likely, like Tom Heaton, going to retire this summer. So I think it's two players there that should be cut from the squad this summer, you would imagine.
Yes, it's a release and a retirement. I think that's pretty straightforward. I would be gobsmacked if United were trying to get either of them tied down on a new contract. It would be totally illogical.
Yep, absolutely. And Luke Shaw now, obviously a player that can play left back and centre back. We've barely seen Luke Shaw in the past sort of 14 months. His injury situation, a bit like Lisandro Martinez, makes him an unsellable player. It's just a case of, can he get back to what we know he's truly capable of? But with his injury record, it's going to be a very, very difficult task. So it's one of those, isn't it, where you'd like to see him stay, kick on, but at the same time, he's not a player that could be easily sold.
I don't think I think they should be looking to get him off the books somewhere or other. A season-long loan with an option to buy, possibly. I think there would maybe be a taker for Shaw in that capacity. I don't think you can't hang your hat on him. He's someone who started 9 times in 19 months for United. Bruno Fernandes will have played as many times for the club in 8 days' time as Luke Shaw has, and their debuts are separated by 5.5 years. There were about 3 general elections and the Brexit referendum during that time. That's how much happened during the period they weren't teammates at Manchester United. You just cannot countenance someone who's that injury prone, and he would be an extraordinarily hard sell. But they need to try and find someone, even if it comes to deadline day. They need to be looking to get rid of him because he's a high earner as well. He's, as Ratcliffe alluded to, he's one of the 8 highest earners in the squad. So it would certainly help PSR getting him off the books with a club covering the majority or possibly all of his wages if he was to be farmed out on loan. But as you said, that there's no way that anybody's going to be paying actual money to permanently sign him in the summer because he's not started a club match for 13 months now.
And I suppose the other thing that'll be in Luke Shaw's mind is if he can get back to some sort of fitness and possibly goes out on loan, he's got the World Cup in just over 12 months' time to think of, with obviously trying to force his way into Thomas Tuchel's plans. But moving on, Samuel, Patrick Dorgu, one of the newest additions to this squad. He's had a very good start, in my opinion. He's certainly shown flashes of what he can do, what he can offer, fits the system very well. I don't think he's going to be going anywhere anytime soon, is he?
No. It would be a major shock if he was. That's another easy keep.
And Tyrone Marshall, obviously out on loan at the moment with PSV Eindhoven. I recently spoke to a Dutch football expert sort of to get the lowdown on how he was going on at PSV. And the general feeling was basically he's going to have to move on. He's never going to suit a wing-back role for Ruben Amorim. And I think we saw that in the few appearances he's got before he headed out on loan.
Yes, that is a very easy sell, and he should be easy to sell as well. Going off his, I think they paid up to 14 million for him in 2022. He's got 1 year left on his contract, so it's about £3 or £4 million that United would require to sell him and avoid a loss under PSR. So, I mean, Amorim pretty much said he's got no future at the club after his final appearance against FCSB. He was substituted at half-time in 4 of his 5 starts. The great thing for him is that he can continue his career after that long absence with a knee injury, and he is playing regularly for PSV. So it's an easy sell. It has to be an easy sell.
Yeah, fully agree with that one. And the last defender, given he made his first team debut just over a week ago, I thought he'd been included on the list in Harry Amas. Been a long overdue debut, Samuel. We both watched him closely at the pre-season tour last summer. We're very impressed by him. He got a lot of plaudits. Had to wait a long time for that debut, but I think he's now at a juncture in his career where he needs a loan spell possibly next season to get some first-team exposure and regular first-team minutes under his belt.
That would ideally be the ideal scenario, but if Ruben Amorim, it's one to put on Amorim really. It's like, do you plan to use this player in the future? Do you not plan to use this player in the future? If you don't plan to use him, you might as well cut the cord and sell him and try and cash in at a time where he's about to play in an FA Youth Cup semi-final and he's just made his debut and he is an England youth international. You could get a few £1 million for him, but having seen him in the youth team and on that pre-season tour, I hope he gets more opportunities at United, because he should have made his debut a long time ago. He should have been the starting 11 for the first game of the season in the Community Shield against City. So I was particularly pleased for him that he got those minutes against Leicester, and he did pretty respectably as well.
Yeah, he did. He looked quite composed and quite comfortable. And lastly, in fact, I've just missed him off my list, even though it's probably going to be an easy one. Aidan Heaven, he's been the talk of the town in the past week or so, Samuel. Unfortunately, with people chasing injury updates on him, but a very new recruit, he's not going anywhere, is he?
No, that is another easy keep. Been really impressed with him, and hopefully he plays in April. And it's looking at Ty's story on Friday, I think it was. I think there's maybe a decent chance of that. So fingers crossed for him, because he's been excellent in every game he's played so far.
Yeah, he certainly has. Looks like money well spent on him very, very early on. But moving into midfield now, Samuel, and we're going to kick off with probably one of the easiest calls you're going to make on this podcast, I would imagine. Casemiro. I don't think there's going to be any conflict of opinion in this one.
It's sell if they can sell him, which is still a big if. They would require 15 million, and even Saudi Arabia clubs are not really hot for Casemiro. They certainly weren't last year. He was, I mean, United would have required a 30 million fee last year. They just were never ever getting that. What works in their favour at the moment is that he's actually had a pretty good March, and you can see him being an asset in the European games. I mean, it's going to be, it's almost a plot point itself. Matic against Casemiro, 130 something ex-United midfielder against the current 30 something ex-United midfielder. How will they fare? Two of the best defensive midfielders of their generation as well, you would say. But United need quality midfielders to come in the summer, and they need to make room for them. And Casemiro has been in decline pretty much since the start of last season, that mismatched partnership with Mason Mount. So he has to go if at all possible. But what I will say for him is that throughout his whole time at United, however well he's played, however poorly he's played, you've never been able to question his commitment. And I know that should be the bare minimum for a footballer, but we have seen footballers who don't earn as much as Casemiro, and they're not as committed. Or we've seen players who earn a similar amount to Casemiro, and they don't look as committed as him. So his stock is on the up. It's creeping up slightly, but it's certainly not going to be changing or hoodwinking anyone. He has got to be sold if at all possible in the summer.
Yeah, it's got to be one of their leading priorities. And I think United supporters and us generally will appreciate the job he did in that first season at Old Trafford. Him and Christian Eriksen together in midfield, that they did a very, very good job, I thought, in what was Erik ten Hag's first season at the club. Obviously, United did bring in a defensive-minded midfielder last summer in Manuel Ugarte, 23 years of age, one for the future, but also the here and now. And a bit like Lenny Yoro, really, Matthias de Ligt, they've got better as the season has developed. And I think it's quite clear that, having worked with Ruben Amorim previously at Lisbon, he's going to have a key part to play in his plans moving forward, you would imagine.
Yeah, a very easy keep. There is, I don't want to use the word potential because he is 23, but, and as you said, he is for the here and now as well. And he has got better in the past 3 months. He tailed off recently a bit, I thought, before he got his injury. But even against Everton, where he was having as almost everyone in that side was, Goodison in United shirt, they're having a dreadful day, but he had the resilience to score a top-notch equaliser. And as you said, there is, I'm trying to avoid using that word that we normally just, you want to use it with a teenager or a 20-year-old, or even maybe a 21-year-old. But he's going to be an important player for United for the run-in, and of course beyond this season as well. A very easy keep.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. And Christian Eriksen is another one out of contract this summer. He discussed his future last week, admitting that he was already sort of preparing his mind for something else elsewhere. That was enough proof in the pudding to say that he's off. He knows what's coming, and United would be right to cut their losses with him.
Yeah, very easy release. Very good in his first season. Not been so good in his second or third season. And I think this season is mirroring last season for him as well.
Yeah, opportunities have not been as forthcoming as he would have liked. But he is obviously now 33. He's going to gradually begin that decline, you would think. Toby Collier, Samuel, is another midfielder, another player that's been on the rise this season. We've seen flashes of what he could bring to the table. There's been some good contributions from him. Feels like he could have a part to play in the long-term plan. quite an easy keep, I would think, on him.
Yes, unless there was a decent fee that came in for him, and you think, well, might as well sell him. A bit like with Willy Camboala last year, it just made infinite sense to sell an academy player when that money was being offered for him. And I think Collier's a more assured player at senior level than Camboala was. Camboala was a lot more, I think, as back. He had some good moments. He had some very, very bad moments, very shaky moments. Collier's probably not started as many games as people would think. And of course, where he's come through the academy, he would represent a pure profit. But again, looking at the bigger picture, you want to move on ideally Eriksen and Casemiro. Mainoo could become a playmaker in that team. Fernandes and Ugarte is a very good settled midfield duo, but you do need you need quality to compete with them and to support them. So I genuinely believe that United need 2 midfielders in the summer, and for that role, you probably need 5 overall, and the 5th, as he would logically, would be Collier, which is pretty much the role he's playing at the moment and has played for most of this season. So it would be, in principle, provisionally, it would be keep. But as I said, if there's a decent fee that comes in for him, you wouldn't think twice about selling him, because it just makes sense from a financial perspective, and in fairness, a football perspective as well, because I think he's always probably likely to be a squad player at United.
I think in some ways, obviously, he's had a lot more opportunities than James Garner did, but I suppose it draws comparisons in some ways in the fact it is a sort of a box-to-box midfielder who can do a little bit of everything, but probably, certainly at this stage, not going to be a first-choice starter every single week.
Yeah, and look, you need players like that as well, but the dynamics of squad management have changed exponentially because of financial fair play and PSR. And since it came into play, really, and it was on United's mind about 3 years ago, you look at, I think it's 6 of their 7 most lucrative sales have been academy players, which would be Andres Pereira, James Garner, Anthony Elanga, Dean Henderson, Mason Greenwood, and Scott McTominay. I think the only player that is within that list in terms of how much money they got for him is Wan-Bissaka. But there's a clear pattern there, and that's, if you've got a good player who's come through the academy, then there is more of an incentive to sell them than to keep them. And I think with those players that were sold, apart from Garner, because I thought that was the wrong call, but it's not exactly been a call United have regretted, even though he's clearly a Premier League quality midfielder. I think they were absolutely right to sell all those players. It made sense. McTominay, okay, his goals output was good last season, but United needed a defensive midfielder that was far more pressing for the needs of the team. So to finance that, McTominay had to go through Ugarte to come in. Elanga, at the time he was sold, nobody had a problem with it whatsoever. It is a deal that has, gone well from Nottingham Forest, and Nottingham Forest are doing well, and Anthony Elanga is doing well at a time that the wingers United had on their books then, they've all fallen by the wayside, whether it's Rashford, who's been bombed out, Sancho's been bombed out, Marshall, you could bracket as well. He was released last year, even though it ceased to be a football player, really. Never mind a winger. But that's the dilemma. Whereas yesteryear, like John O'Shea, you knew he would stay at United for. I think he made his debut he properly came into the first team squad in 2001. He didn't leave until 2011, so he was pretty much in the first team setup for 10 years. And Darren Fletcher, to a lesser extent, because he had a couple of years where he was absolutely pivotal for that Manchester United team, but made his debut in 2003, didn't leave until 2015. And as Dan Ashworth said to us in September, he said the era of the one club player is probably over, which is a great shame, but that will absolutely come into the thinking. And Ruben Amorim has said the club needs to get better at selling players from the academy as well.
Yeah, it's certainly an area that's got to be improved this coming summer. But speaking of academy players, arguably the jewel in the crown for many, Kobbie Mainoo, Samuel. There's been a lot of chatter about him. with regards to obviously the PSR situation, links with Chelsea, but he should be a player United are fighting to keep, because when he's on his A game, he is a very, very, very good player, and there's a lot more to come, you would like to think.
Of course, yeah, it's an easy keep. He could easily become a playmaker in that team. He has a world-class ceiling, I think, and he's come through the United Academy. You always need that homegrown core. I know I've just said that you need to sell some players from the academy as well, which I'm not rowing back on whatsoever. But you've just got to get that balance right. And United haven't quite got that balance right. They've always promoted players from the academy into the first team, and they've always been, even in one of the worst teams in United's recent history last season, it's the two academy players who are scoring the goals in the FA Cup final, which again, it reinforces the point that the academy is not just one of the best things about Manchester United, but probably the best thing about Manchester United. And that's why it's absolutely imperative that there are always, some of the senior players, some of the senior starters are academy players. And my mind hasn't changed with Mainoo and Garnacho since last season, even though they have had difficult seasons this season, Mainoo more so. The potential of both is vast, and Mainoo's he's still a teenager, isn't he? I think he turns 20 next week. So, and he's accomplished a fair bit already, and there is a hell of a lot more to conquer in a Manchester United shirt for Kobbie Mainoo.
Definitely. And I would imagine Mason Mount will be feeling the same, in the fact that he wants to offer a little bit more. He's obviously had a very, very testing time since arriving at United in July 2023. Another injury-plagued season, Samuel. But Ruben Amorim, every time he's had the chance to speak about Mason Mount, his face has lit up. He's clearly a very big fan of him and has got plans for him if he can prove his fitness. But like Luke Shaw, like others, his injury situation is not going to make him an attractive option for clubs to buy. But I would imagine Ruben Amorim was sort of saying, if we can keep you fit, you've got a big part to play in my plans.
Yeah, I mean, if the question posed straight, keep or sell, I would say sell, because he's played in 33 out of 98 games for United. He's too injury prone. They shouldn't have signed him in the first place because they thought they were getting a midfielder, which just baffled me, because anyone who watched him knew that he was a playmaker. He is fortunate that they have stumbled upon, is maybe a little bit harsh, but the way they went about the managerial change, I think it's still fair to go with it. They've settled on, shall we say, a coach who plays a system that Mount has played in two of the biggest finals you could play in as a footballer, the Champions League final and the European Championship final. Granted, they were 4 years ago, but you can see him having a role in that team. And also, if United can't properly reinvest in the squad in the summer, that takes care of one of those positions. If you can't get Matheus Cunha in, which would be a tall order anyway, then you can play Mason Mount. The big problem, of course, is that he's hardly ever available to start. He started 6 games this season, 3 of them were in August. And that game where he got injured against Brighton, the first half, it was one of his best halves, probably his best half, in fact, for United. You could see the merit in having him in that role. He was playing as the playmaker, I'm pretty sure, which didn't reflect well on Ten Hag or the hierarchy, that had left by that point, because they signed him as a midfielder, which I can never really get my head around. Apart from the facts that he was coming to the final year of his contract, so it felt like he was attainable. United were in the Champions League. They were on the up again. They were an easy sell. But it just, Mason Mount and Manchester United just seemed to jar with me from the very start. And I know it's a minor thing. It's something that young fans would complain about. But giving him the number 7 shirt as well, I just thought, there's going to be enough pressure on him as it is. And then giving him a number that is not really, I don't think he was one of the names that would have been in line to get that number. You kind of ask him for trouble, given how cursed that shirt is as well. But it goes back to the point that he's unsellable. No club's coming in and paying money for him. What was it, £55 million on a 5-year contract? Nobody is going to be spending the money that United would need to avoid a loss on Mason Mount. And as you said, Amorim has said twice or 3 times now how much he loves him. So I don't think that's I don't think that's a hollow statement by him whatsoever. I think he's someone that he really likes the look of, and he will be hoping that he gets to play him a hell of a lot more often next season. But I kind of like the old rule United could swear by, and they can't anymore because the way the game has changed. But if you're not up to it after 2 seasons, you're out the door, and that's why there are still players in that squad and players who have recently left, I suppose, who outstayed their welcome by 3 or 4 times that amount. Marshall was there for 9 years. 9 years. Victor Lindelof would have been there for 8 years. You can see why they are where they are with decisions like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least in the category of midfielders, Bruno Fernandes. Samuel, I don't think there's going to be any doubts in this choice you're about to make, is there?
Not now, no. There was certainly doubt in last summer, and again, I had my misgivings about the contract they gave him and how quickly United were to yield and just essentially extend his contract by a year, but give him a big pay rise. And then Fernandes didn't actually play well in the first few months or the first half of the season as well. And you thought, is this another example of United cocking up a contract and the player getting too comfortable? And really, that would have been unlike him. And he has proved since the turn of the year that is unlike him. He's bucked his ideas up. I think that red card on Boxing Day at Wolves has been the making of him this season. Really, United's season has been separated into 2 different one-man bands. In the first half of the season, Ahmad was the one-man band. In the second half of the season, Fernandes is the one-man band. And you did the maths on it. They'd be 17th without him in the Premier League, and that says it all. And if he's being dubbed a fabulous footballer by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think it's safe to assume that he will be kept as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, that does bring an end to part 1 of the Samuel Luckhurst Show. We're back again in part 2 in a few moments' time, where we're going to have a quick look through the attackers and see what Samuel's got to say on those. Welcome back to part 2 of the Samuel Luckhurst Show from the Manchester Evening News. As I said a few moments ago, we are now going to focus on the attackers within United's first team ranks, and we'll kick off with the strikers and then move out to the wingers and the sort of the number 10s. Samuel, some big headline names within this bunch. We'll kick off with their current number 9, Rasmus Højlund, who finally ended that goal drought at Leicester last weekend and then scored again for Denmark against Portugal last week. Where do you sit with him? Obviously, a very big transfer fee was paid for him not so long ago, really.
I think this is a really nuanced one, not just with Højlund, but Zirkzee, because until about 2 months ago, I think everybody would have agreed that one of them had to go to make way for a new goal scorer coming in, because they were seen as the 2 number 9s. Amorim has quite rightly decided that Zirkzee is not a number 9. And look, Zirkzee has done very well since the humiliation against Newcastle when he was subbed in the 33rd minute. He's shown good character. Again, he's somewhat fortunate that Amorim's system suits him, because there are two number 10s that United play with. He can operate as one of them. And United have got to the latter stages of European competition, and there are clearly players in the squad who thrive more in the Europa League than the Premier League, because the pace is slower and it is more technically based at times. It's not as frenetic. I mean, the Premier League is a very technical league, as we all know, but you have got more time in Europe, and that suits Zirkzee. But he doesn't score enough goals, and Højlund doesn't score enough goals. And it would be wrong for a club of Manchester United's size and stature to countenance that from those two. With Zirkzee, I think there would be more of a market for him, because he costs pretty much half the amount that Højlund did. Højlund was a fee rise into £72 million. Zirkzee was a £36.5 million deal. And there was interest from Italian clubs in January, when it looked like his days might be numbered at United after that Newcastle match. And if you can I mean, they need to get rid of a few forwards anyway. So this is why I'm almost bracketing them together. And I'd be inclined to say keep Højlund, because as a support striker, I think he'd be fine. That is the role he should have occupied if United were ever going to sign him. But because of the circumstances, they decided to make him the starting striker, which was always a mistake, and it's proven to be the case because he's only got, I think he's got 24 goals for the club overall. And I thought his first season was actually pretty good in the context of it. His second season has not been good. Maybe that Sociedad game where he played well and then he scored in the next appearance against Leicester, and of course he scored an international duty for Denmark. Maybe that Sociedad game will be the turning point for him. So I would probably go keep Højlund, but sell Zirkzee, even though Zirkzee has become this cult figure among the supporters. I mean, not that it should matter. Like, if you look at a player and you think, oh, he's a cult figure with the fans, we can't sell him. No, of course you should be able to sell him. You should have that right. So I think just from the standards that Manchester United require, one of them has still got to go. But I would not be surprised if both of them are at the club next season, purely because they've been separated now. One's a number 9, one's a number 10. And there is a role for both of them as squad members. United are not really going to ever get anywhere with Zirkzee as a long-term number 10. That's just not going to happen. I mean, people need to remind themselves that United are 13th in the Premier League. It's nearly twice as bad as their finish last season. You know, they were, I think they were 15th, weren't they, at kickoff against Leicester just 8 days ago. So they need to start up in the standards of just about every area of the squad, and most importantly, really, it's recruitment. And Zirkzee should never have been signed. He wasn't a number 9. They completely got it wrong there, Ten Hag and Dan Ashworth. But credit to him, this calendar year he's done decently, but he's still not what United need. United still have a minus goal difference, and if they are to get anywhere next season, Højlund and Zirkzee have to be squad members, not starters. But for the latter stages of the Europa League this season, you can see both of them starting, even with 2 or 3 players maybe coming back.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Joshua Zirkzee, to his credit, as you've just outlined, Samuel, since going into that number 10 position, we've certainly seen the better version of him. And I think when you could do a direct comparison, we saw when he started as the number 9 against Arsenal, when Højlund was on the bench recently, that it's quite clear he is not a number 9, even though many of us had worked that out a long time ago. I think the most recent comparison told us everything we needed to know. But speaking of the number 10 positions, there is obviously an argument for United to strengthen in that department come the summer. But there is already quite a bit of competition for places in that area of the team. Obviously, Fernandes we've mentioned, Mainoo we've mentioned as potential, Mason Mount too. Amad, obviously, you mentioned him a moment ago. The one-man band in the first half of the season was absolutely terrific. Could return before the season ends, Ruben Amorim said. The question is for Amad, where do you play him? Do you play him as possibly the right wing-back, or is that right-sided number 10?
It depends if they get a right winger or a right back or a right wing back, however you want to phrase them, phrase their role. But he can play in both. And I think it might have been Amorim who said it recently. He said that first 11s don't exist anymore because so much rotation is required with the volume of matches in a season. And look, it is absolutely certifiable that there were Nations League games going to extra time on Sunday night. I mean, there needs to be a backlash over that. That having extra time in Nations League matches is just madness. It's permissible for a playoff for a World Cup or a Euros, absolutely. It's fine for in major tournaments, but when the season's 2/3 of the way through, and then players are going away, and some of them having to play 120 minutes in Nations League matches, which, as compelling as they were, as you could see from the score lines, it's crazy. And that's why you're not seeing settled starting 11s anymore. And that's why it's good to have players who can obviously play in different positions. And that's what Omar Barada told me the other week. That's what United are going for with the recruitment now. It is players who can play in different systems. They will not, although they play a very singular system with 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1, they want players who can play in different systems. And I think the potential of that formation it should be quite fluid. You should be able to shapeshift a bit, move to a back four, go to 4-5-1 at times. At times it's looked too rigid for United because they don't actually change that formation during games. But of late, where they have picked up a little bit of form and the performances have certainly improved, they have been a lot more fluid and they've started to get among the goals, getting 7 in their past 2 games, which is very rare for them, most certainly, and particularly in the 2 competitions that I suppose are the most important for them as well this season. So that is a modicum of progress, and that there are going to be tougher tests ahead, and we're not going to be judging them on a couple of games before the spring internationals. But that's why, I mean, obviously Ahmad is an undeniable keep anyway. He got his long-term contract, rightly so, and he may have been, well, he was the player of the season up until he got injured in early February. So I think you've got to be quite relaxed about things like that. But in terms of the other options you have for those roles, that is an altogether different debate, because it's, are you going to get players in? Are you going to get another playmaker in? Are you going to be able to get a right winger in? I'd argue that they need players in both of those areas. But every summer United end the transfer window short in 1 or 2 areas. And I suspect that will be the case this summer as well, where the finances are more difficult than they ever have been.
Alejandro Garnacho is another player we've obviously seen play a lot of football in the number 10 position since Ruben Amorim came in. Been linked with Chelsea, was linked with Napoli in the January transfer window. Napoli, in fact, put an offer in for him. He's probably one of those that you do want to keep, Samuel. Obviously, there's PSR advantages of him again, but he's a player, as we've already discussed with Mainoo, that's got a very high ceiling and that P word, a lot of potential. He's
an easy keep, even though there were 1 or 2. There've been 1 or 2 lapses from him this season. He has got a bit of an attitude at times. He's like your typical Gen Zer going on social media complaining about something that he shouldn't be complaining about when he needs to knuckle down more. But in fairness to him, he has knuckled down. I think he's actually had overall, even though he's not scored enough goals this season, and he started the season well in terms of his goals output. But you look at his performances in games under Amorim, where he's come on and he may not have the numbers to back it up, but his impact in certain games has been good. He certainly is an impact sub, which you don't want him to be, and that was a somewhat regressive of him as well, to become an impact sub again, because that's how he started out coming into the team. And last season he started, 38 consecutive games, and that was how vital he was. So he's got to get back to that level of being a consistent performer as a starter, and there has been some progress of late. And again, similar to Højlund, hopefully for him, getting his first domestic goal since November, I think it was. Hopefully that sets him up well for the run-in. So for me, he's still a player that if there was, I know Amorim said there isn't a first 11, but if you were picking if every United player was available, I suspect he would still be getting into that starting side.
You would certainly expect so with the talent he's got, and you made a good point there, Samuel, about how United generally, even if his numbers don't back it up, they've looked a lot more threatening on the pitch when he's been there. There was countless games after Christmas when he came off the bench, and they looked a lot brighter, a lot more sprightly. Sticking with wide players, some of these though currently out on loan. Marcus Rashford obviously left to go to Aston Villa in the mid-season window. Villa have the option to sign him permanently. It's quite clear he doesn't figure in Ruben Amorim's plans. I would imagine this is a straightforward sell for yourself.
Yeah, he has to be sold. He needed a change of scenery last summer, and he got it 6 months later, and he's done okay at Villa. His form has been grossly overstated by a lot of punters out there who just think that anyone who leaves Man United becomes a brilliant player again all of a sudden. But he's not actually scored in 9 games for Villa, and he's still not a regular starter for them. But he has looked better. He couldn't really look any worse. Some of his performances for United this season, if people can at all remember them. So he has to be sold for every conceivable reason you can think of. There's not a logical reason to keep him.
No, I would agree with that. And another player obviously out on loan currently in the Premier League is Jadon Sancho. At Chelsea, there was obviously a bit of chatter about him this morning, how Chelsea might have found a potential loophole to exploit where they don't have to meet that obligation to buy him permanently. But whether it's Stamford Bridge or elsewhere he ends up, Samuel, he's another one that United need to shift permanently this summer.
Yeah, and he should be easier to sell this summer than last summer. Going off the PSR, he won't command as high a fee as he would have a year ago, and his stock is slightly higher just because he's played more football. But then again, it's not that high because he's not been playing well at all really for Chelsea. Again, he was another player early on. His impacts were being overstated because people thought that, United are an easy target sometimes, and I note the irony there. I'm probably the first to declare open season on them when they absolutely deserve it. But there are times when they don't deserve it. And I think Rashford and Sancho are two examples where they don't deserve to be pilloried. And I know I'm coming on, I'm sure, straight away and quite nicely is Anthony. I don't think they deserve to be pilloried for his impact. He's playing well for also Rans in La Liga, and look how poor Real Sociedad were against United for apart from maybe 30 minutes across the 180 minutes. La Liga as a league, it's not as taxing or as demanding as the Premier League, and Real Betis is certainly nowhere near as taxing or demanding as Manchester United.
No, definitely not. And I think obviously Anthony's tally of 4 goals, 4 assists in 11 games is pretty telling, isn't it? Obviously, United found him out on loan, no obligation or agreement attached for Betis to make it permanent in the summer. So it was an opportunity for him to go out, play some football, raise his stock, which he's done so far, and drive that price up ahead of the summer. But I think, Samuel, you said a few podcasts ago how possibly this coming summer it might be an opportunity for United to send him out on loan again, but with the option to buy attached to it as sort of an obligation, where obviously United have got something set in stone for 12 months further down the line.
Yeah, I think with him, given the impact he's had in Spain, they would want to control his value more rather than having that fixed price on it. Because if he was to go out on a season-long loan again, and then you've got, say, an obligation to buy, the obligation would be it'd be about £16.25 million going off the time. He'd have 1 year left in his contract come summer 2026. And if he is, say, he goes out on loan again next season and he's playing like he's been playing on loan recently, United feel shortchanged if they're selling a potential Brazil international, and a Brazil international who may also be back in the national team squad and may also be at the World Cup. They would feel shortchanged just giving him away for £16 million at that point. So at the moment, it's going along quite nicely with Anthony, but they are going to have to, give quite decent amount of consideration as to how they negotiate that final fee when eventually he does leave, which could still be this summer. But Real Betis will not be paying that money for Anthony. There are very few, well, there are probably literally just the 3 clubs in Spain who would be able to afford him at just over £32 million. And let's face it, I don't think Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid or Barcelona are going to be signing him. Maybe they will be, but that would be a real turn up for the books.
Yeah, it certainly would. It feels somewhat unlikely at this stage, shall we say. But last but not least, Samuel, Chido Obi is obviously a player that's come into the first team in the last few weeks, right at the very end, the last one to wrap this up.
A bonus addition.
A very easy keep for him. He's shown flashes of enormous potential, both for the first team and obviously at youth level.
Yes, and given his age, I wouldn't be sending him out on loan next season either. I think he would still be too young for that. So, yeah, I think there's a decent... Well, yeah, he would be eligible to have another crack at the Youth Cup as well, depending on how United get on in the latter rounds. I mean, they're in the semi-finals against Aston Villa. If they were to win it, I don't think they would use him next season, because it's quite a fair policy by the club. They if you've won it, then and you're eligible for it for the next season, you don't get used now, and that's not always been the case. I think Paul Scholes played. He was obviously part of the class of '92, but he did play in the Youth Cup final in 1993 because he was still eligible. But Chido Obi, that it depends on how United get on against Villa, then potentially against Manchester City in the final, should the two Manchester clubs progress to the furthest point in that competition. But yes, a very, very easy keep, and he's had a very good first year. I don't think he could, apart from maybe taking one of those chances against Fulham, it's gone perfectly for him so far.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And on that positive note, that does mark the end of this episode of the Samuel Luckhurst Show. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Also, make sure to leave a like or possibly a comment as well, reacting to Samuel's choices. We'll be back again on Friday to discuss all of the very latest Manchester United news and opinions. So make sure you subscribe for when that drops, and we'll catch you again later in the week for another episode of the Samuel Luckhurst Show.